Chapter 6. The main tasks of the study of the book. Understanding the book. Working out the content of the book. Thinking through the book. Evaluation and criticism of the book. 1. The main tasks of working out a book. The main tasks of working out a scientific book are 3. 1. The book must be correctly and clearly understood. 2. Thoughts and information contained in it must work out in our mind, in our psyche. 3. In many cases, and must be made assessment of its content. In practice, all these 3 tasks are inseparably merged with one another. While working on one of them, you involuntarily have to touch on the rest. But then one of them, then the other can be highlighted. Let's consider these tasks in more detail. 2. Understanding a book. Understanding a book is often not as easy as it sounds. Here the most dangerous thing is the illusion of understanding. It seems that he understood, but in reality he understood, but not quite, or understood, but incorrectly. I had to explain to another, and got confused. Or he began to reread sometime, and suddenly inspiration, so this is what it means. How could I have read before and did not understand? But it seemed that I understand. Such incidents probably happened to everyone. If you feel that you do not understand, there is a hope that, having worked hard, you will understand. And if it seems that he understood, but in fact he does not, then the error may remain. The first condition for understanding the book is sufficient preparation. Each book, with the exception of the very popular ones, assumes the reader's knowledge, one more, the other less. If there is no basic necessary knowledge, then the reader, whether he is 7 inches in the forehead, will not understand it. Suppose a person does not know simple arithmetic, but takes up a book on the calculus of variations. How much will he understand in it? It is clear what will come of this. He will either throw the book away, like a monkey glasses in Krylov's fable, or it will seem to him that he understood. As a result, porridge of the head. The second condition is understanding of foreign words and scientific terms of the book. Most of them, with sufficient preparation, are usually known. Some are explained in the book. But some have to be explained to oneself on their own. To do this, you can either use a dictionary of foreign words, an encyclopedic dictionary, manuals of a given science, etc., or guess the meaning of the term, comparing several places in which it occurs. The third main condition is the ability to delve into what is being read. The eyes, especially the eyes that are used to running through the read, really run along the lines forward, and the read thoughts glide superficially in the mind. In order to penetrate more deeply into a thought, one must be able to hold it back and concentrate all the power of attention on it. This requires a special characteristic effort, probably known to everyone and so unpleasant to the lazy mind. Whoever does not know how or is too lazy to delve into what is being read, for that, real knowledge is closed. 3. Working out the content of the book. Amount of the content of the book you have read should do a certain work in our psyche, in our mind. If we just remember it, as, for example, it happens with memorizing, and it remains in our mind, like butter on water, without mixing with what we already have, then this is dead capital, an unnecessary clutter of memory. What we read in the book should somehow connect with the thoughts, information, emotions, etc., which we already had, enter the system, or change them. This is his job. This is the working off of the content of the book. And the deeper the connection is established between the read and what we had before, the more and deeper the additions and changes made by the read, the better and deeper the processing. If the book you read does not produce work, but is only remembered, then this is the most fertile ground for turning the reader into an idle chatter, a phrasemonger, etc. p. Working out the content is very different in detail, depending on the content of the book, the reader's goal, the ability to read, etc. But for most books it can be reduced to 2 main types. First type. The content of the book can be assimilated by us. Here we understand this word in its most direct sense, it really becomes our own. As food is assimilated by a healthy body and processed into its constituent parts, so the read thoughts and information can become part of our thinking as an integral part of it. They are received from other people, but they are ours in the real sense of the word, because they have become, as it were, a part of our I. They determine our conclusions, our outlook, our actions. We usually cannot create a great thought ourselves, but we can make it ours if it becomes the determining force in our life and in our worldview. When asked what do you think about that? If this question concerns any scientific topic or the foundations of the worldview, we answer in most cases with borrowed thoughts. This is especially clearly manifested in the field of ideology. The philosophical, economic and political views of Marx, Engels and Lenin become the basis of our worldview, and we are guided by them in life and thinking. This is how we often assimilate the content of a good read book. This is how manuals in various sciences are usually assimilated. This is one type of working out the content of the book. The second type of working off is the opposite. We do not accept the contents of the book as true. Vice versa. We reject it because it seems erroneous or incompatible with our views. This is where work is done, often no less valuable than when it is assimilated. If we have a good understanding of other people's thoughts and have a good grasp of them, something in our thoughts will be supplemented, corrected. They will become more distinct and deepened, more definite and more grounded. Finally, this makes it possible to quite clearly and sharply dissociate from the thoughts of the author. The thesis becomes quite distinct only when opposing the antithesis. 4. Thinking over the book. The content of the book, its thoughts, information, etc., can only work out in our mind when it comes into contact with the thoughts and information that we already have. We have already said that the very work of the book consists precisely in supplementing or changing our thoughts and information. If the subject being read is even a little familiar to us, we can compare the thoughts and information of the book with ours and compare, evaluate, correct our mistakes, find flaws in other people's thoughts, come to new conclusions, etc. Work is the thinking through the content of the book. The more our own thoughts, knowledge, emotions are involved in this work, the greater the results, the deeper the thinking. And, we add, the more useful it is for self-education and mental development. It so happens that both the comparison of what is being read with what we already have, and new thoughts about what is being read come along the way, spontaneously, without any difficulty on our part. These are happy, although many have frequent accidents. You cannot be limited to them. It is useful and even necessary to create a habit of conscious and deliberate thinking, thinking in the real sense of the word. For this, the first condition is not to read without respite, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter. Thinking work, like any other, takes time. The second condition is to be able to maintain attention for some time on the same issue. The rest depends on the personal characteristics of the reader, his knowledge, etc. After reading an interesting thought, dwell on it, think about it, about the consequences that it entails, listen to those new thoughts that it may cause in us, raise the question whether it is true or not, and to solve it on hide your strength, develop, if necessary, thought further. This is an elementary case of thinking through, and you must use every reason to practice this art. The thoughts that come to our minds while reading, all the same, random or as a result of work, are often very valuable to us. Such thoughts now need to be written down on a piece of paper or in a notebook, because, according to the testimony of a number of thinkers who had a phenomenal memory, even the most beautiful thought, if it is not written down, is in danger of being irrevocably forgotten. It is said of Leibniz that he wrote down his thoughts on almost every noteworthy book on small sheets of paper. But, having written, he threw them aside and did not look at them again, as he had an amazing memory. Why did he write them down after all? Not just to remember? No, because when writing down a thought it is necessary to formulate it precisely, distinctly, succinctly, and without this the thought can flicker in passing, remaining unclear, vague. Moreover, we need to get used to writing down other people's thoughts that may be useful to us. It is very important to keep a deep thought, information that is important, interesting for us, especially in our specialty, etc., for ourselves. To do this, you need to either write out it on a separate card, or make a short summary, concisely state its essence, make an excerpt. More on this later. 5. Evaluation and criticism of the book when reading for self-education. As far as possible, only the best, outstanding works of people outstanding in intelligence and scholarship are selected. A question arises for some: how can I criticize such a book when I am just still studying? Do not be afraid of this. Just know the value of this criticism. Sometimes it happens that later you laugh at her yourself, but a few things may be right. This is criticism for the development of our thought, for defining views, in order to learn criticism. From the beginning we have the right to question, to find contradictions, to find errors, be inappropriate 37 vowels. We should, a little something seems suspicious, put a question mark and try to decide whether this is so or not. We must ask at every step the question, so or not? Without this there is no initiative of thought. But, having raised the question, we must solve it in good faith and carefully working on the solution, to the best of our ability. If you are unable to do this, then leave it as a question. Do not decide on the fly. If it seems to us that the author has a mistake, then the first consideration should not be as the author is stupid, but did it seem to me that there was a mistake here? Am I wrong myself? Then we will take up a thorough check, and it often turns out that we were wrong. For example, the author has no contradictions, it just seemed to us. And such a check is a very rewarding job. We must remember that criticism is a double-edged sword. Sometimes it shows the mistakes and shortcomings of the book. Sometimes, the criticism's frivolity and ignorance. It's funny to watch. A young man is reading a book of an outstanding person. He worked hard on the issue for whole years, armed with all the necessary knowledge and methods, and was recognized as a great thinker. A young man has almost no knowledge, and almost never thought about the question, and actually he does not read the book, but looks through, but at the same time has the courage to self-confidently and with aplomb, sometimes somewhat condescendingly, patronizingly criticize the author. In Chlestakovsky, well, brother, Pushkin? This should be avoided. Here the stick falls entirely on the critic. Real criticism requires not only courage, but also knowledge and work. To criticize is not only to find mistakes and shortcomings, but also to find merits. In general, to evaluate, learning to distinguish great from medium and even small is even more difficult than finding mistakes. You may ask otherwise. Have you read Boonin? Was reading. Liked? Yes, not bad. Have you read War and Peace? Was reading. Liked? Yes, not bad. This person has no mental perspective, there are no mountains for him, everything is a plain. The Himalayas are indistinguishable from the Pargolovskaya hills. In this regard, I cannot but remember my youth. In my youth, I, an inhabitant of the plains, came to the Caucasus for the first time. I looked from the village in which I was staying at the mountains, close, 38 at hand. On the day I will go boldly. But experienced people told me, you won't get there in 2 days. And so it happened. I passed the Daryl Gorge. There is a steep mountain slope near the first station. Let me, I think, climb. Not high, I will fly in an instant. But at a quarter of the climb I was already thinking about whether to climb, and halfway down I grabbed a thorny bush and lay exhausted and confused. Looking down from habit is scary, the soil crumbles underfoot, and at the top the climb is even steeper. Barely then I came down. This is how experience taught me that in the mountains there are completely different standards than on the plain. It takes a lot of exercise to get used to them. Where mental heights are concerned, assessment is even more difficult. To be able to somehow measure here requires a lot of work. Another author has few mistakes, but flat. Moderate, decent, respectable, neat, but nothing more. Another has a lot of mistakes, but he also has such treasures for which you will not regret anything. Greatness is not measured by mistakes. Eagles happen to descend below the chickens. But chickens will never rise to the clouds. And criticism when reading with elaboration should consist not only in marking the erroneous and dubious, but also in assessing especially outstanding places. It is extremely important, after reading and developing a book and your criticism of it, to read a thorough criticism of it by some major specialist. And also with the appropriate study, comparisons, verification. This greatly deepens the assimilation of the book, and thought, and critical skills.